In a small coastal town nestled between rolling hills and shimmering waters, life was peaceful. The air carried the scent of salt and blooming flowers, while the sound of waves crashing against the shore provided a soothing soundtrack to everyday existence. This idyllic place was home to Carter's Cove, an exclusive resort known for its luxury and charm. It wasn't just a getaway. It was a sanctuary where people came to escape the chaos of their busy lives. And at the heart of this paradise stood Mr. Elias Carter, the man who had built it all from scratch. Elias was not your typical boss. He preferred staying out of the spotlight, letting his trusted team handle day-to-day operations while he focused on bigger-picture decisions. His employees admired him for his calm demeanor and sharp mind, but they rarely saw him in action. To most guests, Elias was more of a myth than a person, a name whispered in hushed tones by staff members when discussing the resort's impeccable standards. Yet despite his hands-off approach, Elias cared deeply about every detail of his business. He believed that Carter's Cove wasn't just a resort. It was a promise, a commitment to offering guests an unforgettable experience rooted in respect, beauty, and tranquility. But this summer, something unusual began to disrupt the harmony of the cove. A wave of tourists unlike any before descended upon the town. These weren't the usual polite travelers looking to unwind. Instead, they were loud, careless, and often disrespectful. They partied late into the night, leaving behind empty bottles and cigarette butts on the once pristine beaches. Some ignored signs asking them to stay off protected dunes, trampling fragile plants without a second thought. Others argued with staff over trivial matters or demanded special treatment, creating tension among both employees and other guests. The locals, too, felt the strain. Fishermen complained about tourists littering near the docks, while shopkeepers grew frustrated with rude behavior. Complaints poured in daily, from broken lounge chairs left unattended to noise complaints that kept families awake until dawn. The staff worked tirelessly to address these issues, but the problems only seemed to multiply. Sarah, the resort manager, found herself overwhelmed. She tried everything she could think of, sending gentle reminders, imposing fines, even calling security. But nothing seemed to work. The situation was spiraling out of control. One evening, as Sarah sat in her office surrounded by stacks of incident reports, she realized she couldn't handle this alone. Picking up the phone, she dialed Elias's number. Her voice trembled as she explained the severity of the situation. "Mr. Carter," she said, "we need you here. I don't know what else to do." On the other end of the line, Elias listened silently. For the first time in years, he felt a pang of unease. He knew he couldn't ignore this crisis. If Carter's Cove was going to survive, he would have to step in personally, and soon. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the water, Elias made up his mind. Tomorrow, he would leave his quiet retreat and return to the resort. Little did anyone know, the arrival of their elusive boss would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. The next morning, the quiet hum of Carter's Cove was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. A sleek black car pulled into the resort's driveway, its tires crunching softly against the gravel path. Out stepped Elias Carter, dressed in a crisp navy blazer and tailored trousers. His presence alone commanded attention, though he carried himself with a calm, almost understated confidence. Employees who caught sight of him whispered to one another in disbelief. It wasn't every day that the man behind the resort made an appearance, let alone during such a chaotic time. Elias didn't waste any time. He walked straight to the main lobby, where Sarah awaited him with a folder full of incident reports. Her face was pale, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm sorry it's come to this. We've tried everything, but—" She trailed off, unable to find the right words. Elias simply nodded, his expression unreadable. He opened the folder and began flipping through the pages, his sharp eyes scanning each report. Broken furniture, noise complaints, littered beaches. It was worse than he had imagined. Determined to understand the situation firsthand, Elias spent the rest of the day observing the chaos around him. By mid-afternoon, the resort's pool area had turned into a scene straight out of a rowdy party. Music blasted from portable speakers, drowning out the sound of the waves. Empty cans and snack wrappers littered the deck chairs, while groups of tourists splashed recklessly in the water, ignoring lifeguard warnings. Nearby, a heated argument broke out between two families over reserved cabanas. Voices rose, tempers flared, and within minutes, security had to step in to prevent the situation from escalating further. Elias watched silently from a distance, his jaw tightening with each passing moment. He noticed how the staff scrambled to keep up. Waiters rushing back and forth with trays of drinks, housekeeping teams trying to clean up messes faster than they could be made, and receptionists fielding endless complaints. The stress on their faces was evident. They were doing their best, but it wasn't enough. The sheer volume of unruly behavior was overwhelming. As evening approached, Elias decided to take a walk along the beach. What he saw there only deepened his concern. The once pristine shoreline was now dotted with discarded plastic cups, food wrappers, and cigarette butts. Footprints marred the delicate sand dunes, crushing native plants that played a vital role in preserving the ecosystem. Even worse, a group of tourists was attempting to build a bonfire near a restricted area, completely disregarding warning signs about fire hazards and environmental protection. When a staff member approached them to explain the rules, they laughed it off, claiming no harm would come from just one little fire. Frustration bubbled inside Elias, but he forced himself to stay composed. This wasn't just about property damage or inconvenience. It was about something much bigger. Carter's Cove represented more than just a business. It was a piece of paradise that belonged not only to him, but also to the local community and future generations. Allowing it to be treated so carelessly went against everything he stood for. That night, as Elias sat alone in his private suite overlooking the ocean, he allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. He thought about the years of hard work it had taken to build the resort, the sacrifices he'd made, and the dreams he'd nurtured. He thought about the loyal employees who depended on him, and the locals who relied on the cove for their livelihoods. And then he thought about the current state of things, the noise, the disrespect, the disregard for rules, and felt a surge of determination. Something had to change, and it had to start with him. Delegating responsibility had always been his style, but this situation called for direct action. The next morning, Elias rose before dawn, his mind already racing with ideas. He stood on the balcony of his suite, sipping a cup of black coffee as he watched the first rays of sunlight dance across the water. The beauty of the cove was undeniable, but it was overshadowed by the chaos that had taken root. Today, Elias decided, would mark the beginning of a new chapter, not just for the resort, but for how people viewed their role in preserving its magic. After finishing his coffee, Elias called an emergency meeting with Sarah and Marcus in the resort's private conference room. The space was simple yet elegant, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the ocean. As they sat around the polished wooden table, Elias laid out his concerns in clear, measured tones. "This isn't just about unruly guests," he said, his voice firm but calm. "It's about protecting what we've built here, our values, our environment, and the experience we promise to everyone who walks through those doors." Sarah nodded, her pen poised over a notepad as she listened intently. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, clearly skeptical. "You really think stepping in yourself will make a difference?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "These folks don't seem like the type to change their ways easily." Elias smiled faintly, his expression unwavering. "Maybe not," he admitted. "But if we approach this the right way, we might be able to shift their mindset. Rules are important, yes, but understanding why those rules exist is even more powerful. If we can show them the bigger picture, the impact of their actions on the community, the environment, and other guests, they might start to see things differently." With that, Elias outlined his plan. First, he would personally engage with the most problematic tourists, not as an authority figure looking to punish, but as someone invested in helping them understand the value of the cove. He wanted to build connections, not create enemies. Second, he proposed organizing informal gatherings where guests could learn about the history of the area and its significance to the local community. Finally, he emphasized the importance of reinforcing positive behavior, rewarding those who respected the rules and contributed to the well-being of the resort. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances, surprised by the depth of Elias's vision. Though they still had doubts, they agreed to support him. Over the next few days, Elias immersed himself in preparation. He reviewed guest profiles, noting patterns of behavior and identifying key individuals who seemed to influence others. He studied conflict resolution techniques, determined to handle confrontations with grace and tact. He even spent time speaking with local residents, gathering stories and insights that could help him connect with the tourists on a deeper level. One evening, as he pored over notes in his office, Elias paused to reflect on the challenge ahead. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Some guests would resist, others might mock his efforts, and there was always the risk of backlash. But he also knew that doing nothing wasn't an option. This was his legacy, his responsibility, and if stepping out of the shadows meant saving Carter's Cove, then so be it. By the time he finished preparing, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. For years, he had relied on his team to manage the day-to-day operations of the resort. Now he was stepping into uncharted territory, ready to face the storm head-on. As he turned off the lights in his office and headed to bed, he allowed himself a small smile. Tomorrow, he would meet the tourists, not as the distant owner of Carter's Cove, but as a man determined to protect the paradise he loved. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Elias Carter was no longer content to watch from the sidelines. The following morning, Elias made his presence known in a way that no one at Carter's Cove had ever seen before. Dressed impeccably in a tailored light gray suit with a crisp white shirt, he walked into the main dining hall just as breakfast service was in full swing. The room buzzed with chatter and clinking silverware, but the moment Elias entered, there was an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. Guests glanced up curiously, some recognizing him immediately, while others simply sensed that this man carried an air of authority. Elias moved gracefully through the space, stopping at various tables to introduce himself. "Good morning," he'd say with a warm smile, extending his hand. "I'm Elias Carter, the owner of Carter's Cove. I hope you're enjoying your stay." At first, many guests were taken aback by his approachability. They expected someone distant or intimidating, not a charming host who seemed genuinely interested in their experience. Some even snapped selfies with him, delighted by the unexpected encounter. For now, Elias played the role of the gracious host perfectly, leaving a trail of goodwill in his wake. But beneath the surface, Elias was observing everything. The loud laughter from a corner table, the crumbs scattered across the floor near another group, the careless way some guests left plates half-eaten on empty tables. He filed away these details, waiting for the right moment to address them. Later that afternoon, Elias encountered his first real test. A group of young tourists, notorious for their late-night parties and disregard for rules, attempted to bypass the resort's strict dress code at the poolside bar. Dressed in ripped jeans and tank tops, they argued loudly with the staff member stationed at the entrance. "This is ridiculous," one of them exclaimed, throwing up his hands. "We're paying customers. You can't tell us what to wear." Word of the commotion reached Elias quickly. Calmly, he approached the scene, his expression neutral but commanding. The arguing stopped as soon as the group noticed him. "Is there a problem here?" Elias asked, his tone polite but firm. The staff member hesitated, unsure whether to step aside, but Elias gave her a reassuring nod. Turning back to the group, he continued, "I understand you're eager to enjoy our facilities, but we do have guidelines in place for a reason. Our dress code ensures a certain standard of comfort and respect for all guests." One of the tourists scoffed. Respect. It's just clothes. What's the big deal? Elias didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his voice steady and measured. It's not just about clothing, he explained. When everyone adheres to the same standards, it creates an environment where everyone feels valued and respected. This resort isn't just a place, it's an experience. And part of that experience is maintaining harmony among all our guests. For a moment, the group looked unconvinced, exchanging skeptical glances, but something in Elias's demeanor, his calm confidence, his genuine conviction, seemed to strike a chord. Finally, one of them shrugged and muttered, "Fine, whatever. We'll change." To everyone's surprise, they actually followed through, returning later dressed appropriately and apologizing to the staff member they had argued with earlier. News of the incident spread quickly throughout the resort. Staff members whispered excitedly about how Elias had handled the situation, while guests began speculating about the mysterious boss who wasn't afraid to step in personally. By evening, Elias's reputation as a hands-on leader had grown significantly. People started paying closer attention to the rules, curious to see if Elias might appear again. As the sun set over the cove, Elias stood on the balcony overlooking the pool area, watching as families laughed and couples strolled along the pathways. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of order, a quiet rhythm returning to the resort. He knew this was only the beginning, but it was a promising start. With each interaction, Elias was proving that leadership wasn't about enforcing rules blindly. It was about inspiring understanding and fostering mutual respect. And as he turned to head inside, he couldn't help but feel a spark of optimism. Change was possible, one conversation at a time. As the days passed, Elias continued to make his presence felt around Carter's Cove. He didn't just stop at addressing rule breakers. He began taking steps to build bridges with the guests, especially those who had been causing trouble. His goal wasn't merely to enforce discipline, but to help them see the bigger picture, to understand why the rules mattered and how their actions affected others. One of his first initiatives was organizing informal gatherings on the beach during sunset. These weren't formal meetings or lectures. Instead, they were casual get-togethers where guests could relax with drinks and light snacks, while Elias shared stories about the cove. He spoke passionately about its history, describing how the land had once been a quiet fishing village before he transformed it into a sanctuary for travelers seeking peace and beauty. He talked about the delicate ecosystem of the coastline, the dunes that protected against erosion, the marine life that thrived in the clear waters, and the native plants that kept the soil stable. "I built this resort because I wanted to share this paradise with people like you," Elias said one evening, his voice warm but sincere. "But preserving it requires effort from all of us. Every time someone litters or damages the dunes, it takes away from what makes this place special, not just for today's visitors, but for future generations too." The tourists listened intently, some nodding thoughtfully while others sipped their cocktails quietly. Over time, these sessions became more interactive. Guests started asking questions about the local culture, the challenges faced by the community, and even Elias's own journey as the owner of the resort. He answered honestly, sharing both triumphs and struggles, which made him relatable. Slowly but surely, a connection began to form. People who had once dismissed the rules as unnecessary inconveniences now found themselves considering the impact of their choices. Of course, not everyone warmed up immediately. There were still moments of resistance, particularly from a small group of repeat offenders who prided themselves on bending the rules wherever they went. One night, after a particularly loud party spilled onto the main lawn, Elias confronted the ringleader, a brash businessman named Greg. When Elias politely reminded him of the noise policy, Greg shot back defensively, accusing him of being overly controlling. "You're ruining the fun," Greg snapped, his face flushed from alcohol. "People come here to let loose, not to follow some strict set of rules." Elias didn't react angrily. Instead, He took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I understand wanting to have fun. That's exactly why I created this place. But true enjoyment comes when everyone can share in it equally. Imagine if every guest decided to play music at full volume late into the night. Would you enjoy your stay then?" Greg opened his mouth to argue but paused, clearly thinking about Elias's words. After a moment, he muttered something under his breath and walked away, though noticeably quieter than before. It wasn't an outright victory, but it was progress. Word of these interactions spread among the guests. Some began mimicking Elias's example, reminding each other to clean up after picnics or keep noise levels down. Others volunteered to join staff-led beach cleanups, inspired by the stories Elias had shared about environmental conservation. Even the locals noticed the shift. Fishermen who had grown wary of tourists now greeted them warmly, appreciating the newfound respect shown to their community. By the end of the week, Elias could see tangible results. The beaches were cleaner, the atmosphere calmer, and the staff less frazzled. More importantly, there was a growing sense of shared responsibility among the guests. They weren't just visitors anymore. They were stewards of Carter's Cove, invested in protecting its charm. As Elias stood on the balcony of his suite one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. Change hadn't happened overnight, but it was happening, and for the first time in weeks, the cove felt like itself again, a haven of peace and beauty. Elias knew there was still work to be done, but he also knew something else. When people understood the why behind the rules, they were far more likely to follow them, and sometimes even embrace them. Despite the progress Elias had made, not everyone was pleased with his hands-on approach. A small but vocal group of guests began to push back against what they saw as unnecessary interference. These were the entitled few who believed that paying for a luxury stay gave them the right to do as they pleased, regardless of the impact on others. They didn't appreciate being lectured by the owner, and they weren't shy about voicing their displeasure. One morning, Sarah approached Elias with a worried expression. In her hand, she held a stack of formal complaints submitted by some of these dissatisfied guests. "They're threatening to leave bad reviews online," she said, placing the papers on his desk. "Some are even saying they'll cancel their stays if you keep meddling in their vacations." Elias sighed, rubbing his temples. He had anticipated resistance, but seeing it in writing made the challenge feel more real. The thought of negative publicity weighed heavily on him, not just for his own reputation, but for the hard-working staff who depended on the resort's success. Yet he refused to compromise his principles. If anything, the backlash only strengthened his resolve. "We can't please everyone," he told Sarah firmly, "but we can stay true to our values. That's what will set us apart in the long run." Determined to address the growing tension, Elias called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. Marcus, Sarah, and a few senior staff members gathered in the conference room, their faces reflecting a mix of frustration and concern. Elias listened carefully as they shared updates. Rumors spreading among guests, whispers of discontent among employees, and fears about potential damage to the resort's image. When it was his turn to speak, Elias leaned forward, his voice steady and reassuring. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," he began. "Change never is. But giving up now would mean letting down everyone who believes in what Carter's Cove stands for, the staff, the locals, and the majority of our guests who respect this place. We need to find creative ways to handle this without losing sight of our goals." Together, the team brainstormed solutions. They decided to introduce new activities designed to engage guests positively, such as guided nature walks, cultural workshops led by local artisans, and evening storytelling sessions around a bonfire. These events would not only entertain but also educate visitors about the importance of preserving the cove's beauty and traditions. Additionally, they agreed to implement a reward system for guests who demonstrated exemplary behavior. Small tokens like complimentary spa treatments or personalized thank you notes from Elias himself. To reassure his employees, Elias held a separate meeting with the staff. Standing before them in the staff lounge, he acknowledged their hard work and expressed gratitude for their dedication during such a challenging time. "I know this hasn't been easy for any of you," he said, his tone warm and sincere. "But I want you to know that your efforts matter. You're not alone in this. I'm here, and we're going to get through it together." His words lifted spirits, reigniting a sense of unity among the team. Inspired by Elias's commitment, many staff members took the initiative to go above and beyond in their roles. Housekeeping teams left handwritten notes in guest rooms, thanking them for keeping their spaces tidy. Waitstaff shared interesting facts about the local cuisine during meals, sparking conversations that fostered connection. Even security personnel adopted a friendlier tone when addressing minor infractions, focusing on education rather than enforcement. Meanwhile, Elias continued his personal outreach, targeting the most resistant guests with patience and diplomacy. During one particularly tense encounter, a wealthy socialite accused him of ruining her vacation by enforcing quiet hours. Instead of arguing, Elias invited her to join him for coffee the next morning. Over steaming cups of espresso, he shared anecdotes about how past guests had cherished the tranquility of the cove, explaining that maintaining that atmosphere was key to its allure. By the end of their conversation, the woman softened, admitting she hadn't considered the broader perspective. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. While some guests still grumbled, many started to embrace the changes, recognizing the value in respecting the environment and each other. Online reviews reflected this shift, with glowing comments praising the resort's unique charm and thoughtful leadership. For every complaint, there were 10 compliments, and those numbers spoke volumes. As Elias walked along the beach one evening, watching families build sandcastles and couples stroll hand in hand, he felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead wasn't smooth, but it was moving in the right direction. With perseverance and teamwork, Carter's Cove was proving that as the weeks rolled on, the transformation at Carter's Cove became impossible to ignore. The once chaotic and unruly atmosphere had given way to a calmer, more harmonious environment. Guests who had initially resisted Elias's efforts began to embrace the changes, realizing that following the rules didn't detract from their enjoyment. It enhanced it. What started as small victories slowly snowballed into something remarkable. One of the biggest shifts came when a group of tourists who had been notorious for their rowdy behavior decided to take part in one of the resort's new eco-friendly activities, a beach cleanup initiative. At first, they joined reluctantly, perhaps out of curiosity or boredom. But as they worked alongside Elias and some of the staff, picking up plastic bottles and tangled fishing nets, something clicked. They began asking questions about the impact of ocean pollution, the struggles of local fishermen, and how even small actions could make a difference. By the end of the morning, they weren't just participants. They were advocates, encouraging other guests to join future cleanups. Word of these positive changes spread quickly, both within the resort and beyond. Local residents, who had grown wary of tourists over the years, noticed the shift too. Fishermen waved warmly as guests passed by. Shopkeepers engaged in friendly conversations, and children played freely on the streets without fear of disruption. The sense of community that had once felt strained was now thriving, thanks in large part to Elias's efforts to bridge the gap between visitors and locals. Media outlets soon caught wind of the story. A travel journalist staying at the resort wrote a glowing article titled "The Boss Who Saved Paradise," detailing Elias's hands-on approach and the remarkable turnaround at Carter's Cove. The piece highlighted interviews with satisfied guests, grateful employees, and appreciative townsfolk, painting a vivid picture of a place reborn. Within days, the article went viral, sparking interest from other publications and social media platforms. Photos of the pristine beaches, smiling faces, and vibrant cultural events flooded online feeds, drawing attention from travelers around the world. Reservations for the upcoming season skyrocketed, with many prospective guests citing the resort's commitment to sustainability and respect as key reasons for booking. Families eager to teach their children about environmental responsibility reached out, as did couples looking for a peaceful retreat. Even corporate groups expressed interest in hosting events at Carter's Cove, drawn by its reputation for fostering meaningful connections. Despite the success, Elias remained grounded. He knew that maintaining this momentum would require ongoing effort. During a team meeting, he introduced long-term policies aimed at ensuring responsible tourism became ingrained in the resort's culture. These included stricter enforcement of environmental guidelines, mandatory orientation sessions for all new arrivals, and partnerships with local organizations to support conservation projects. He also announced plans to create a guest ambassador program, where returning visitors could help mentor newcomers on the importance of preserving the cove's beauty. The staff embraced these initiatives wholeheartedly, inspired by Elias's leadership. Sarah, in particular, took charge of organizing workshops and training sessions to prepare employees for their expanded roles. Marcus worked closely with security to refine protocols while maintaining a welcoming tone. Together, they created an ecosystem where accountability and kindness went hand in hand. By the final week of the season, Carter's Cove was unrecognizable from the chaotic mess it had been just months earlier. The beaches sparkled under the sun, the gardens flourished with colorful blooms, and laughter echoed through the air. Not the loud, disruptive kind, but the joyful sounds of people genuinely connecting with each other and their surroundings. As Elias stood on the balcony of his suite one last time before closing the season, he allowed himself a quiet moment of pride. He thought about the journey, the sleepless nights, the difficult conversations, the moments of doubt, and realized that every challenge had been worth it. Carter's Cove wasn't just a resort anymore. It was a testament to what could be achieved when people came together with a shared purpose. And though the season was ending, Elias knew the real work was only beginning. This was no longer just his paradise. It belonged to everyone who stepped foot on its shores. As the final days of the season drew to a close, Carter's Cove stood as a shining example of what could be achieved through determination, empathy, and leadership. The once disruptive tourists had transformed into advocates for responsible travel, spreading awareness among their peers about the importance of respecting natural spaces and local communities. Families left with stories to share, couples departed hand in hand with memories etched in their hearts, and even the most skeptical guests admitted they'd experienced something truly special. Elias spent his last evening at the resort walking along the shoreline, the cool breeze brushing against his face as he reflected on everything that had transpired. He thought about the challenges, the late-night arguments, the complaints, the moments when doubt had crept in, and how each one had pushed him to grow not just as a businessman but as a person. This wasn't just a victory for Carter's Cove. It was a reminder that meaningful change required courage and persistence. The next morning, Elias gathered his team for a farewell meeting before heading back to his private retreat. Standing in the same conference room where he'd first laid out his bold plan, he addressed them with heartfelt gratitude. "None of this would have been possible without you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've shown incredible resilience and dedication, and I couldn't be prouder of what we've accomplished together." He went on to outline his vision for the future, expanding eco-friendly initiatives, strengthening ties with the local community, and continuing to educate guests about sustainable tourism. But more than anything, he emphasized the importance of staying true to the values that defined Carter's Cove: respect, responsibility, and unity. "This is your home too," he reminded them. "Take care of it, and it will take care of you." With that, Elias stepped away from the spotlight once again, leaving behind a legacy that extended far beyond the resort itself. Inspired by his journey, Sarah and Marcus took the lead in implementing his long-term policies, ensuring that the progress made during the summer wouldn't fade with time. Employees embraced their roles as stewards of the cove, while returning guests carried forward the lessons they'd learned, becoming ambassadors for responsible tourism wherever they traveled. In the months that followed, Elias poured his experiences into writing a book titled Leading by Example: How One Resort Changed the Way We Travel. The book detailed his struggles and triumphs, offering practical advice for other hospitality professionals facing similar challenges. It became an unexpected bestseller, praised not only for its insights but also for its message of hope and accountability. Through his words, Elias reached audiences worldwide, inspiring countless readers to rethink their approach to travel and leisure. Back at Carter's Cove, life continued to thrive. The beaches remained pristine, the gardens vibrant, and the bond between locals and visitors stronger than ever. Guests arrived with a newfound appreciation for the delicate balance required to preserve such a unique destination. They participated eagerly in workshops, volunteered for conservation projects, and shared their experiences online, further amplifying the resort's reputation as a model of sustainable luxury. For Elias, the transformation of Carter's Cove was more than just professional success. It was personal fulfillment. He had always believed that businesses should contribute positively to society, and now he had proven it was possible, even in the face of adversity. As he sat in his study overlooking the ocean, watching another sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, he felt a deep sense of peace. Carter's Cove wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was alive with purpose, and that, Elias realized, was what mattered most. By stepping out of his comfort zone and confronting the chaos head-on, he had not only saved his paradise, but also redefined what leadership meant. It wasn't about authority or control. It was about inspiring others to see the bigger picture and work together toward a common goal. As the waves lapped gently against the shore, Elias smiled to himself. The story of Carter's Cove was far from over. It was just beginning. And though he preferred to stay behind the scenes, he knew that his actions had set a standard others would strive to follow. After all, true leadership wasn't about being seen. It was about making a difference. And Elias Carter had done exactly that.